then wrongfully executed. And I know something else, I said. What's that? These killers aren't brilliant like Gary Sinigi or Kyle Craig, but they're every bit as deadly. They're expert at what they do, and what they do is kill and get away with it. Sampson frowned and shook his head. Not anymore. Chapter 41.
Thomas Starkey had been born in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and he still loved the area passionately. So did most of his neighbors. He'd been away for long stretches while he was in the Army, but now he was back to stay, and to raise his family as best he possibly could. He knew that Rocky Mount was a great place to bring up kids. Hell, he'd been brought up here, hadn't he? Starkey was devoted to his family, and he also genuinely liked the families of his two best friends. He also needed to control everything around him. Just about every Saturday night, Starkey got the three clans together and barbecued. The exception was during football season, when the families usually had a tailgate party on Friday night. Starkey's son Shane played tailback for the high school. North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Georgia Tech were after Shane, but Starkey wanted him to put in a tour with the Army before he attended college. That's what he had done, and it had worked out for the best. It would work for Shane, too. The three men usually did all the shopping and cooking for the Saturday night barbecues and the tailgate parties. They bought steaks, ribs, and hot and sweet sausages at the farmer's market. They selected corn on the cob, squash, tomatoes, asparagus. They even made the salads, usually German potato, coleslaw, macaroni, and occasionally Caesar. That Friday was no exception, and by 7:30 the men were in their familiar positions beside two Weber grills, staying downwind from the wafting smoke, drinking beer, cooking every meal to order. Hell, they even cleaned up and did the dishes. They were proud to deliver the food just right and to get pretty much the same kind of applause given to their sons on football nights. Starkey's number two, Brownlee Harris, tended to intellectualize. He'd attended Wake Forest and then gone to grad school at UNC. The irony is pretty thick here, don't you think? He asked as he gazed at the family scene. Fuck all, Brownie. You'd see irony in a turkey shooter and a clusterfuck in a rice paddy. You think too goddamn much, Warren Griffin said and rolled his eyes. That's your problem in life. Maybe you just don't think enough, Harris said, then winked at Starkey, whom he considered a god. We're going off to kill somebody this weekend, and here we are calmly barbecuing sirloin steaks for our families. You don't think that's a little strange? I think you're fucking strange is what I think. We got a job to do, so we do it, no different from the way it was for a dozen years in the big army. We did a job in Vietnam, in the Persian Gulf, Panama, Rwanda. It's a job. Of course, I happen to love my job. Might be some irony in that. I'm a family man and a professional killer, so what of it? Shit happens. It surely does. Blame the U.S. Army, not me. Starkey nodded his head toward the house, a two-story with 5 bedrooms and 2 baths he'd built in 1999. Girls are coming, he said. Put a lid on it. Hey, beautiful, he called, then gave his wife Judy a big hug. Judy Blue Eyes was a tall, attractive brunette who still looked almost as good as she had on the day they were married. Like most of the women in town, she spoke with a pronounced Southern accent, and she liked to smile a lot. Judy even did volunteer work 3 days a week at the Playhouse. She was funny, appreciative, a good lover, and a good life partner. Starkey believed he was lucky to have found her, and she was lucky to have chosen him. All 3 of the men loved their wives, up to a point. Hell, that was another juicy irony for Brownlee Harris to ponder late into the night. We must be doing something right, Starkey said as he held Judy in his arms and toasted the other couples. You sure did, Judy Blue Eyes said. You boys married well. Who else would let their husbands sneak off for a weekend every month or so and trust that they were being good boys out there in the big bad world? We're always good. Nobody does it better, Starkey said, and smiled good-naturedly at his closest friends. It doesn't get any better than this, it really doesn't. We're the best there is.
Chapter 42.
On Saturday night, the 3 killers made their way north to a small town in West Virginia called Harper's Ferry. During the road trip, Brownlee Harris's job was to study maps of the AT, as the Appalachian Trail was called by many of the people who hiked it regularly. The spot where they were headed was a particularly popular place for hikers to stop. Harper's Ferry was tiny, actually. You could walk from one end of town to the other in less than 15 minutes. There was a point of interest nearby called Jefferson Rock where you could see Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia. Kind of neat. Starkey drove for the entire trip, no need for any relief. He liked to be at the wheel and in control anyway. He was also in charge of entertainment, which consisted of his Springsteen's Greatest Hits tape, a Janis Joplin, a Doors, a Jimi Hendrix anthology, and a Dale Brown audiobook. Warren Griffin spent almost the entire trip checking the team's supplies and readying the rucksacks in back. When he was finished, the packs weighed about 40 pounds, a little more than half of what they used to carry on their recon missions in Vietnam and Cambodia. He had prepared the packs for a hunt and kill, the kind of ambush Colonel Starkey had planned for the Appalachian Trail. Griffin had packed standard-issue canteens, LRPs, meals that were pronounced lerps, hot sauce to kill the taste of the lerps, a tin can for coffee. Each of them would have a K-bar, the standard military combat knife, camo sticks with 2 colors of grease paint, boonie hats, poncho liners that could do double duty as ground cover, night vision goggles, a Glock, as well as an M16 rifle fitted with a sniper scope. When he was finished with the work, Griffin uttered one of his favorite lines. "If you want to get a good belly laugh out of God, just tell him about your plans." Starkey was the TL, or team leader. He was in control of every aspect of the job. Harris was the point man. Griffin was rear security, still the junior guy after all these years. They didn't have to do the hunt and kill exactly like this. They could have made it a whole lot easier on themselves. But this was the way Starkey liked it, the way they had always committed their murders. It was the Army way.
Chapter 43.
They made camp about 2 clicks from the AT. It was dangerous for them to be seen by anybody, so Starkey established an NDP, a night defense position for the camp. Then they each kept watch in 2-hour shifts. Nostalgia rules. When Starkey took his shift, he passed the time thinking not so much about the job looming ahead of them, as the job in general. He, Harris, and Griffin were professional killers and had been for over 20 years. They'd been assassins in Vietnam, Panama, and the Gulf War. Now they were assassins for hire. They were careful, discreet, and expensive. The current job was their most lucrative and had involved several murders over a period of 2 years. The curious thing about it, they didn't know the identity of their employer. They were given new targets only after the previous job was completed. As he stared into the dark, restless woods, Starkey wanted a cigarette, but he settled for an Altoids. Those little fuckers kept you awake. He found himself thinking about the blonde bitch they had offed near Fayetteville, pretty Vanessa. The memory got him hard, which helped the time pass. While they were still in Vietnam, Starkey had discovered that he liked to kill. The murders gave him a powerful feeling of control and then elation. It was as if electricity were passing through his body. He never felt guilt, not anymore. He killed for hire, but he also killed in between jobs, because he wanted to and liked it. Strange, scary stuff, Starkey muttered, rubbing his hands together. Scare myself sometimes. The 3 of them were up and ready by 5 the next morning, which was shrouded in a thick bluish-gray fog. The air was cool but incredibly fresh and clean. Starkey figured the fog wouldn't burn off until at least 10. Harris was in the best physical shape of the 3, so he was designated as the scout. He wanted the job anyway. At 51, he still played in a men's basketball league and did triathlons twice a year. At 5:15, he set off from camp at a comfortable jogging pace. Christ, he loved this shit. Nostalgia. Harris found that he was wide awake and alert once he was on the move. He was operating beautifully after just a few minutes on the trail. The hunt and kill was a satisfying combination of business and pleasure for him, for all 3 of them. Harris was the only one up this early on the AT, at least on this particular stretch. He passed a 4-person dome tent, probably some white-bread family. Most likely section hikers, as opposed to through hikers who would take up to 6 months to do the entire trail, finally ending at a place called Mount Katahdin, Maine. Around the dome tent he noticed a camp stove and fuel bottles, ratty shorts and T-shirts laid out to air. Not a target, he decided, and moved on. Next he came upon a couple in sleeping bags just off the trail. They were young, probably go-see-the-world types. They slept on self-inflatable air mattresses. All the comforts of home. Harris got up close, no more than 10 yards from them, before he finally decided to move on. He could tell the girl was a looker, though. Blonde, cute face, maybe 20. Just watching her sleep with her boyfriend got his jets going pretty good. They were a definite maybe. He saw a second couple already up and exercising near their tent about a quarter-mile farther on. They had high-tech internal frame packs and $200 hiking boots and looked like snooty city slicks. He liked them as potential targets, mainly because he disliked the couple so much immediately. Not far past the couple's camp, he came upon a single male hiker. This guy was definitely in for the long haul. He had a high-tech pack that looked light and tight. He would probably be carrying dried food, trail mix, protein drink powder. Fresh food was too heavy and difficult to haul around on your back all day. His wardrobe would be no frills, too. Nylon shorts, tank tops, maybe long underwear for the colder nights. Harris stopped and watched the single hiker's camp for a couple of minutes. He let his heartbeat slow and controlled his breathing. Finally, he slipped right into the man's camp. He wasn't afraid, and he never doubted himself. He took what he needed. The hiker never stirred from his sleep. Harris checked his sports watch and saw that it was only 5:50. So far, so good. He walked back to the trail, then began to jog again. He felt invigorated, excited about the hunt and kill out here on the nature trail. Man, he wanted to kill somebody bad. Man or woman, old or young, it didn't much matter. The next camp he came upon was close. Another couple, still asleep in a 2-person dome tent. Harris couldn't help thinking how easy it would be to take them out right now. Ducks on a pond. Everybody was so vulnerable and trusting out here. What a bunch of loonies. Didn't they ever read the funny papers? There were killers on the loose in America, lots of them. A little less than a mile beyond, he reached the camp of another family. Someone was already up. He hid in the pine trees and watched. A fire had been started and was throwing up sparks. A woman of about 40 was futzing around with a rucksack. She wore a red Speedo swimsuit and seemed in good physical shape. Well-muscled arms and legs, a nice ass, too. She called out, "Wakey, wakey!" Moments later, 2 shapely teenage girls emerged from the larger tent. They had on one-piece bathing suits and were slapping their little bodies with their hands, trying to get warm in a hurry, trying to wakey, wakey. "Mama bear and 2 baby bears," Brownlee Harris muttered. Interesting concept. Maybe too close to the murders at Bragg, though. He watched as the 3 women huddled for a moment around the fire, then took off in a run. Soon he could hear a chorus of war whoops and screams, then laughter and loud splashes as they hit the small brook that ran directly behind their camp. Brownlee Harris moved quickly and silently through the trees until he reached a choice spot where he could watch the mother and pretty daughters frolic in the cold stream. They sure reminded him of the women in the massacre at Fayetteville. Still, they could be the secondary target. He returned to his camp at a little past 6:30. Griffin had prepared breakfast. Eggs, bacon, plenty of coffee. Starkey was sitting in a familiar lotus position, thinking and plotting. He opened his eyes before Harris announced himself. "How'd you do?" he asked. Brownlee Harris smiled. "We're right on schedule, Colonel. We're good. I'll describe the targets while we eat. Coffee smells good. Hell of a lot better than napalm in the morning."
Chapter 44.
Starkey took full command that morning. Unlike the other hikers on the AT, he kept his men deep in the woods, unseen by their fellow travelers or anyone else. It wasn't hard to do. In their past lives, they'd spent